So there's 2 girls, and then there's 1 cemetery. I already know what this title is a play on, but I'm being mature. All right, either way it go. What's good? How you day going? Morning, evening, night, whenever you're watching this video. We're about to check out 2 girls, 1 cemetery. The reason why I really wanted to watch this one though, could be because fall is approaching. Oh, I cannot freaking wait. My favorite time of the year. But I was like, yo, I'm really in the mood for like something. I really want to hear a really good scary story. Preferably a fake one. Not gonna lie to you, but if it has to be real, then let like no one's face F with the D on the front of it. You know, we can't say because of YouTube, whatever. But either way it go, I just really feel like hearing one, and it sounds like it's one. And it's part of the Halloween Scare-a-thon, is it? No, it's not. Damn. My bad. Shit. Yeah, this might be real. Yo, you wanna check out the original video? Link will be in the description below. But let's go.
This story has a wild ending. It is worth sticking around for. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the like button's house and chain them to the bed while they're sleeping, and then put on the far side of the room a very loud speaker and set it to play the song Boots, Boots, Boots by Rudyard Kipling on repeat for at least 48 hours. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story.
Any song hella loud for 48 hours will get annoying as hell. I don't care how great the song is.
Simply put, a goth is someone who finds beauty in things that most other people consider to be pretty dark. But most Americans tend to associate the term goth with the teenagers of the late 90s and early 2000s that wore all black and wore heavy black boots and would hang out in cemeteries. And while that representation of goth culture is, of course, limited, it is a good representation of the 2 protagonists in today's story, best friends Rachel and Molly. In the 1990s, Rachel and Molly were full-blown goths. They had black hair, black makeup, black clothes, they had the black heavy combat boots, and at one point they and their other goth friends started hanging out in a cemetery to be kind of ironic and funny, like, look at us, we're goth, we hang out in cemeteries. And then they actually enjoyed it and began hanging out in a cemetery like every weekend. One Friday night, Molly calls Rachel to go.
It almost sounds like a freaking movie at this point, though. I'm gonna let it finish, though.
And began hanging out in a cemetery like every weekend. One Friday night, Molly calls Rachel to go hang out in the cemetery. And as it happened, Rachel was just sitting at home and she was bored out of her mind. And so the call came at a perfect time. And so Rachel's like, yeah, I'd love to go. So she flies downstairs and she sits on her front step and she's waiting for Molly to show up. And eventually Molly's car rolls down the street and Rachel immediately recognizes that Molly is the only one in the car. And Rachel, whenever she would go to the cemetery at night with Molly, they were always there with a group of at least 4 people. Even though they liked hanging out in the cemetery, they did recognize that it was a little bit creepy at night to be out there. And so they liked kind of rolling in a fairly big group. And so Rachel hops in the...
Not gonna lie, whenever I was in the cemetery at night, I wasn't goth or nothing. But whenever I do stuff, scary-ish, to sum it all up, whenever I do scary-ish, I do like the bigger the group, the better. Because the less people, the more I feel like if something happened, then it's gonna be between, they're gonna get either me or you. Boy, they ain't getting me. But if it's a group, it sounds so bad. And it's a chance everybody else get got and give me time to get away. Oh, fuck it. Now, if it's humans, don't trip. We can scrap with them. But if it's spirits and demons and shit, what you want me to do? Can't fight them, boy. You gotta be fast.
Even though they liked hanging out in the cemetery, they did recognize that it was a little bit creepy at night to be out there, and so they liked kind of rolling in a fairly big group. And so Rachel hops in the car, and her first question to Molly is, where is everybody? Are they meeting us there? And Molly said, oh no, everybody else is either working or they're kind of hungover from the party from last night, so it's just us 2. I hope that's okay. And at the time, Rachel actually in her head was like, no, I don't really want to do this anymore. But she was like, oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we'll just go. It's just the 2 of us. It'll be fine. Molly takes off from Rachel's house and she makes the familiar kind of winding commute to the front gate of this enormous cemetery that sits right in the center of town. They drive underneath this massive wrought iron gate that looks very medieval, very foreboding. It looks like it's out of a cheesy horror movie, this like cliche entrance to a cemetery. And so they go through there and they're on this road that stretches all the way down through the cemetery and basically splits it in 2. On the left side, as you're driving in, was an area closest to town, and also it butted up against a major public university. And then on this side of the cemetery, you had a bunch of residential houses that butted up against the side of the cemetery. And where Molly and Rachel and their crew like to go was on the right side, all the way back in the corner, because there was a section that was kind of situated between these two hills, where not only were they obscured from the cemetery road and the main road once they were down in this little depression, there was also no houses that happened to look over that spot. So it was kind of like the hidden section of the cemetery. And there was also this big boulder that people sat on and a big tree you could lean up against. So that was their spot. So Molly drives in the gates, she heads down that road and she turns right onto a dead end road. She takes that down about a couple hundred meters till it dead ends, and they park. And then the girls get out of the car, they light up cigarettes, and they walk down this hill that's just beyond where this dead end comes to an end. And so they walk down this hill and it brings them to this clearing where this big rock and tree is. Rachel hops up on the rock and she turns around, so she's facing...
let me go back and get that description one more time. Hold up.
She takes that down about a couple hundred meters till it dead ends, and they park. And then the girls get out of the car, they light up cigarettes, and they walk down this hill that's just beyond where this dead end comes to an end. And so they walk down this hill and it brings them to this clearing where this big rock and tree is. Rachel hops up on the rock and she turns around, so she's facing back up the hill they just walked down, and Molly is right next to her on her right, leaning up against the tree.
Okay.
And for the next hour or so, they just crushed cigarettes and talked about their various boyfriend drama and life drama and whatever else they wanted to talk about. After a while, the girls started to smell a bonfire, and from various boyfriend drama and life drama and whatever else they wanted to talk about. After a while, the girls started to smell a bonfire, and from where they were sitting, they could see a hill in front of them, and there was actually another hill over here. And so their view is pretty obscured out of this little valley they're in, so they can't see any fires anywhere. And so they assumed that what they're smelling was a fire coming from the other side of the cemetery, because there's that huge university over there, and they knew sometimes the college kids would come onto the cemetery.
I hope she's not setting her friend up, dog.
And they would light fires over there, and inevitably the police would get called and they would break up the fire, because you're not allowed to have a fire on the cemetery. And whenever they did that, the police would actually make rounds around the entire cemetery, and historically, basically, if you were there hanging out, they would tell you to leave. And so they think, okay, this is probably a good time to leave, because probably in the next 30 minutes to an hour, the police are going to be here, they're going to come over here, see our car, and they're going to ask us what we're doing, and we're going to have to leave. So let's just leave now. So Rachel hops off the rock, and the two of them begin meandering their way back up the hill towards the car. When they get about halfway up the hill, they notice to their right something bright. Now, because they were higher up, they could actually see over the hill to their right, and what they were seeing was the top of a bonfire. So the girls take a couple more steps up the hill to gain some elevation to hopefully be able to see better down into where this fire is. But even when they're up almost at the top of the hill...
I'm not gonna lie to you, dog. Oh my gosh, man. I don't want to say this because I know you judge me, troll me. My bad, something in my eye. Man, you can't do this stupid. I'd have been nosy. I wouldn't have went far. I wouldn't have went like hella close to it, but I'd have been a little nosy. But I do feel like she's setting her up though. I'm not gonna lie.
See better down into where this fire is, but even when they're up almost at the top of the hill, that fire is too far down on the other side of that hill that they can't see any people, and they can't really tell how big the fire is. They're just basically seeing the top flickers of it. Even though they don't know anything about the people over there at this fire, what they do know is when they showed up, there was no fire over there. They would have recognized it. So whoever's over there had to have shown up and built this fire while Rachel and Molly were down at the rock and tree, which means there's a pretty good chance they didn't see Rachel and Molly. This is a pretty private area. Their car was parked a little bit off to the side of the trail. And so Molly picks up on this and she says to Rachel, hey, let's sneak back down and walk up their hill and look down and see who's here. I bet it's a bunch of college kids. It'll be funny to see what they're doing. But Rachel had a weird feeling about it. She's thinking to herself, if this is college kids, why would they have their bonfire this far away from campus? I mean, this is literally the farthest point away from the side of the cemetery that's close to their campus. If they're having a party over here, there's a good chance that anybody going to it is going to need to drive. And that just doesn't make sense if you can just walk to the other side of the campus and have a bonfire over there. And so Rachel is logically deducing that this is probably not college kids. But who else is having a bonfire
Rachel got a
in the
brain in her
secret
head.
section of the cemetery in the middle of the night? And Rachel's thinking that now, if the police come here, they're definitely going to see us because we're so close to this bonfire. And so it's probably not a good idea to stick around much longer. But despite Rachel's hesitations, she is intrigued and she does want to see what's going on
Me
over
too.
there. So the two girls walk down the hill, they make it down to the rock and the tree, then they turn left and they begin walking up this other hill, the hill that's going to bring them up to this fire. And so they only get a few steps up this hill when they are suddenly hit with this disgusting, putrid smell.
Somebody
that just
burning bodies,
encompasses them and it makes them gag, and they're covering their mouth and their nose, and Rachel exclaims, "Oh my God, what is that?" And then as soon as she says it, she realizes she was really loud, and she's like, and Molly's like, and they both freeze, wondering if the people on the other side of the hill have heard them. And after a little bit of silence, Molly's like, "You want to keep going?" And Rachel's like, "No, we gotta go." Between the horrible smell that's obviously coming from this weird fire and the fact that Rachel basically just gave them away. And so for all we know, these people on the other side of this hill have heard us and now they're waiting for us to come over the edge. And it's gonna be really awkward if we suddenly crash their bonfire. Rachel, she's thinking about these things, and so she's like, "Let's go, we gotta go." Molly's disappointed, but she gets it, and the two girls turn around and begin walking back. And so they walk past the tree and the rock on their left. They turn right and they're about to walk up the hill that's going to bring them to their car when Rachel just turns around to look at the hill towards the fire where they were headed before. And standing at the top of that hill is a man just looking down at them. And the fire is illuminating him from behind, and they can clearly tell it's a man standing there looking at them. And immediately the girls felt really uncomfortable. It was almost like they had just been caught spying. Even though they didn't actually get caught spying, it was what they were going to go do. And so they felt like they had almost been caught red-handed.
Just keep going.
And so Molly and Rachel just turn and begin walking up the hill, kind of with their heads down. They just felt kind of awkward. And so they move a few more steps up this hill, and Rachel looks again at where this guy was standing, and he's now gone. And Rachel's relieved, but then she realizes he's gone because he's walking, power walking, down the hill towards them.
Boy!
And Rachel gasps and she grabs Molly and pushes her and says, "Go, go, 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 go." And they start running up the hill, and Rachel looks around, and now this guy is running towards them. He's down now at the rock and the tree. He's gaining on them. They sprint up over the top. They run to Molly's car, and Molly's fumbling with her keys to get the car open, and Rachel's yelling, "Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up." Finally, she gets it open, and they both jump inside. Rachel locks the car doors, and as Molly is turning the key over, Rachel's looking out the back, and she's waiting to see this
real,
guy.
huh?
And sure enough, as they pull off, she sees his head come up over the ridgeline just enough that he can clearly see them leaving, and then he ducks back down and he disappears. And the two of them speed down the road. They make a left onto that main drive, and they speed out of the cemetery. For the first few minutes of their drive, neither of them say anything. This was just a very traumatic experience, and it was also very confusing because
you be trying to make sure you're safe first. I ain't gonna lie, moments like this, once you get away, ha ha ha, they so damn funny. But in that moment, it's just like, dog, we gotta get away. And you ain't gotta speed neither, because if you're a human on feet, unless he got that thing on him, I don't know if he got the pole on him. But if he's just a human on feet, when you get in the car, you ain't gotta speed, but just take off. Because I hate scary movies when they do that. Take off, boom, speed, hit a ditch. Like, oh, here we go, now you stuck. Just go ahead, you do a little bit of speed. You gotta get away, but we ain't gotta fly. So I do think this is a real story at this point. And I got a feeling it's gonna be he was burning dead bodies, huh? And it's gonna be, no Mrballen, it's gonna be one of them crazy twists where it's like, whole time they walked up on, I don't know, Charles Manson. I'm just trying to name someone.
Main drive, and they speed out of the cemetery. For the first few minutes of their drive, neither of them say anything. This was just a very traumatic experience, and it was also very confusing because they thought they were going over to spy on college kids having a bonfire, and then they're hit with that horrible smell. Like, what was that horrible smell? And then they leave, and there's this guy who did not look like he was a college kid. He looked like he was probably in his 40s, and then he's chasing them. You know, like, what was that? And when they did start talking about it, they couldn't really come to any sort of rational conclusion of what had just happened. And so they were both very spooked, and they decide, let's just go home and talk about this tomorrow. And so Molly drops Rachel off at her house, and Molly goes home, and both girls go to bed. The next morning, Rachel gets up, and she heads down to the kitchen where her mom is already there having her morning coffee. She get a call about Molly. And Rachel sits down, and, you know, she's not a big talker. She's not about to start by saying, "Hey, guess what happened to me last night at the cemetery?"
Cause he saw he saw the license plates. I take it, I don't know.
Instead, she just sits there, and for a little bit, her mom just kind of rambles about work and what she's doing that day. And then all of a sudden, her mom, it's like she has this epiphany. And she goes, Rachel, did you hear what happened last night? And Rachel's like, no, what? And her mom's like, someone I work with. I don't know her personally, but she works in the same building as me. She got kidnapped from the parking garage where I parked my car. I have seen her park her car in this lot, and she got kidnapped. And Rachel's like, oh my God, really? Like, what happened to her? Did they find her? And her mom was like, yeah, but it was too late. The person who had kidnapped her had killed her and then tried to dispose of her body at the cemetery by burning her in a bonfire. Rachel suddenly felt sick because now she knew what was happening last night, and she knows what that smell was. Rachel immediately pours her heart out about everything that happened the night before, and her mom is totally horrified, but she's in particular horrified that they clearly had been there when the killer had
and could have possibly been another victim. Is this a real story, or is this like just one of those real scary tales?
Particular horrified that they clearly had been there when the killer had arrived and set up shop and began burning this body.
Yup, because
they were just literally 50 meters away.
Because my bad. Because when they got there, like they said, that fire was not going there. So meaning they was probably bumping heads anyway. Oh shit, this got creepy. Oh shit, this one. Oh my gosh, this is one of the ones that, as you piece it together as it goes on, it gets more and more creepy. I just really hope it's fake.
Horrified that they clearly had been there when the killer had arrived and set up shop and began burning this body. They were just literally 50 meters away the whole time. And so her mom tells her, you and Molly have to go to the police station and make a statement. They have not caught this person yet. You've seen this person, you gotta tell them. And so Rachel calls Molly and breaks the news about what was actually happening the night before and who was actually chasing them to their car, and says, we have to go to the police station. And so they agree, they go down to the police station and they tell them what happened, but they didn't get a great look at him. They could only say that he was maybe in his 40s and maybe average height. And so the police wrote it all down, but they basically said, look, if you can think of more details, we would love to hear those, because this isn't really enough to go on. And so the girls go back home and they're thinking to themselves, did he see us? Does he know that we saw him? Do you think he knows that we know he's a killer now? And so they're freaking out. But luckily, within 48 hours, the police actually caught this guy because he was driving around in the murder victim's car and someone spotted him. They pulled him over and he confessed, and so he went to jail. Needless to say, Rachel and Molly thanked their lucky stars that when they started ascending that hill and they were hit with that smell, that Rachel said, let's not go any farther.
Thank goodness.
Because had they continued and gone to the other side, they could have wound up in the bonfire too. So that's going to do it, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know in the comments what it is.
Creeped out. Just walk up on a nigga and he burning about, oh shit, my bad, dog. What the fuck going on up here? Usually when Mrballen do stories, he have like the real photos and the mock photos to kind of give you a good image, stuff like that, blah, blah, blah. So that's why I was taking, I think this is just like one of those tales that's really creepy, but it's a really good story. Hopefully that's what the fuck it is. And it's a few stories we watch, I think from Mrballen, a couple from like Mr. Nightmare or whatever, where people encounter, like they bump into these people, whatever, but it's like, oh, ish, I just happened to get away, and it's like, what do you know? The person you bumped into, that was dog. Like the DC sniper one with the I think it was the couple that was at the freaking rest stop, whatever. Man, that one was freaking crazy. The dude who bumped into Gacy, whatever, man, it's so many of those stories. Is like, damn, like you just don't know. Hey, I saw this this freaking TikTok, which was freaking kind of funny. I ain't gonna lie. It was like I'm gonna bomb it, but dude, I guess he picked up a guy, like somebody was hitching a ride, so he picked him up, and I guess the guy got in the car and he asked the driver like, thanks for being polite, whatever, blah blah blah, but you're not scared that I'm like a serial killer or something? He was like. The driver responds like, no, like, what's the odds of 2 serial killers being in one spot? And I was like, oh shit, that was crazy. Or being in the same car, something like that. It was crazy dope though. But look, I'm gonna go ahead and get up out of here and chill, enjoy the rest of my night. You go ahead, do the same thing, enjoy the rest of your night, day, evening, morning, whenever you're watching this. Do me a favor, click that like button, I appreciate it. Click that sub, turn that bell on. You keep coming back. I told you, YouTube analytics YouTube analytics are amazing, dog. I can see all that. You keep coming back. Go and click the like button and turn that bell on. Stop hating. You low-key hater. You know that, right? Yeah, you low key look like dog that sold me this Reggie too. Hey, I ain't gonna lie, I'm hot. I'm mad. I bought look. I'm about to go ahead and get up out of here, dog. I want my money back or some better shit. Look, I'm about to go get up out of here. If you enjoyed the video, look, bye.